I wanted to take this spiel to take a moment to just dissect and unpack one argument. Really, it's a tossed off sliver of an argument that has been used to discredit perhaps the most prominent federal judge who is scrutinizing President Trump's deportation efforts. He's James Boasberg, and he has found fault, in both the legal and rhetorical senses of fault, of how the administration is conducting its deportations to El Salvador. The administration claims there were Venezuelan terrorists on board. The judge says, maybe, maybe not. You still have to go about it the right way. The rules have to be followed. I'm summarizing, and I'm sure a critic of the judge would phrase his objections not as enforcing existing laws, but as something closer to upending the rightful prerogatives of the executive branch. Okay. And when I say I'm sure that a critic of this judge would say that, it's because I've been listening to such critics. One prominent critic is named Julie Kelly. She has written extensively about the January 6th rioters / protesters and has become a go-to source in conservative media for her coverage of what she and they call J6th. When members of Congress, Elon Musk and President Trump called for impeachment of Judge Boasberg based on recent rulings they didn't like, Steve Bannon and Julie Kelly talked about it on Bannon's War Room. That's his podcast. It's an agenda setter. The thesis was that Chief Justice John Roberts was totally wrong to issue a fairly benign and obvious public statement saying you can't just go around impeaching judges when they give you orders you don't like.
Do you believe that the opposition here is seeing enough wins and enough traction, at least, in the federal court area that they're going to continue on, or even see a double or triple down of this, ma'am?
Absolutely. And you and I talked about this after Chief Justice John Roberts made his comment about impeaching judges. First of all, it's not his place to comment on that.
Julie Kelly is also a frequent guest on the far more reasonable than Steve Bannon, but no less pro-Trump, Megyn Kelly. And on that show, she made a quick comment or two. It went by rather quickly, but I spent a long time looking into them. So just to set the scene, Judge Boasberg has come under intense critique, including calls for his impeachment over his rulings in the Venezuelan nationals' deportation flights. And Julie Kelly sought to contrast his supposed concerns for Venezuelans, a dangerous and unsympathetic group, with another group that she and her audience regard as much more sympathetic.
He sentenced one man who had just told him that his cancer returned. He sentenced him to 45 days in prison. He sent another woman, 60-year-old woman from Pennsylvania, on nonviolent offenses, sent her to prison for 14 months. Her husband also had cancer. You know, they're aware of how these federal prisons operate. They know exactly how these people are going to be treated. So I think that's the real double standard here, is his very cautious concern over not just the alleged due process rights of these Venezuelans, but worried about how they're going to be treated in an El Salvador prison, when he demonstrated no such concern over how Trump supporters were going to be treated in federal prison.
So you heard it, but I'll summarize. The legal analysis has nothing to do, in this case, with the idea that Judge Boasberg wasn't following the law or interpreting the law to the best of his ability. Here, she was just pointing out or alleging that Judge Boasberg is sympathetic to these dangerous Venezuelans and unsympathetic to these poor old January 6th participants beset by cancer, the lot of them. The truth is not quite so clear. So the 45-day sentence to the man with cancer, that man never went to jail for 45 days. So the woman in that case, Cynthia Ballinger, the wife of Christopher Price, those two weren't violent. That's true. But as Judge Boasberg noted, in order to get to a mob, you need individual people to make up the components of the mob. And those two were definitely components of the mob. This was proven at a trial that they insisted on having, and probably that increased their court sentences. Ballinger and Price, by the way, her name in press accounts is also Price, but in court orders, they were Cynthia Ballinger and Christopher Price. They definitely entered a restricted area. They did this by knowingly stepping over barriers and bike racks. They completely ignored blaring alarms. She came to the Capitol armed with pepper spray and bear spray and a pocket knife. And I will read from court documents. Christopher Price texted, "We're just taking over the Capitol. He also took a video of a woman repeatedly banging on a Capitol window and shared the observations of tear gas and explosions going off and someone on the floor. This was all produced in evidence to show he knew that it was not fine for him to walk into the Capitol. He saw a woman being administered CPR. They knew it wasn't fine to go into the Capitol. Still, they marched onward into the Capitol building. At this point, Ballinger texts, "We stormed the Capitol," and that they, quote, totally owned it. Much later in the case, the fact that we stormed the Capitol had an emoji after it in the original text, but in the court documents, the emoji was excluded, was said to be extremely important. The judge didn't think so. They were part of a mob. They were part of a mob that clearly violated federal law. They were lightly armed, and they knew what they were doing was unlawful. Add it all up, Judge Boasberg sentences Cynthia Ballinger to 45 days and a small fine, and her husband, who had pepper spray and was a self-proclaimed Capitol stormer, he got a sentence of 45 days, but because of the cancer that you heard about, the judge had sympathy. He takes that into account, and I will read from you a document from last year, court orders. The court orders that defendant Cynthia Ballinger shall surrender to the Bureau of Federal Prisons no earlier than March 5th, 2024, and defendant Christopher Price need not surrender until further order of the court. That further order never came. Medical records and doctors were consulted, and what we have here is a quite sympathetic and I would say temperate application of justice to the man with cancer who was storming the Capitol. Now, as far as the 60-year-old woman now, she was in her mid-50s at the time of the Capitol riot/protest. Her name is Sandra Wire. Here's what the court found that she did and what Julie Kelly describes as nonviolent. Wire helped remove the barricades protecting the Capitol and encourage others to do the same, yelling, "Tear it down." Wire continued past additional police lines on the East Capitol steps and forced her way with the crowd into the rotunda doors, yelling, "Charge, don't retreat, and march forward," as well as chanting, "Stop the steal and break the door," with other rioters. Wire joined the rioters, forcing open the doors of the Capitol, pushing past Capitol police officers who had just been violently attacked by the rioters right in front of Wire, who acknowledged that, in her view, that the officers, quote, stood down because the crowd was too massive to contain any longer. And by the way, she was live streaming all of this. So here's some of what she was saying in her live stream. "You know what mainstream media does to Trump supporters and patriots? They're always going to say that we're the violent ones. I haven't seen anybody here be violent. Just a couple, small, maybe 1, 2, 3 people. I've been up front the entire time. I was helping break down barricades too and get into the door." Then she uses her live stream to support and urge people in her home state of Pennsylvania to breach the state capitol there. "You guys, if we do not take this country back now, we are screwed. Get out to your capitals and start fighting back today, just like the people here in D.C. did today. You got to fight back. They ain't gonna fucking shoot you, maybe just with some pepper spray or flashbangs or something. Look at these patriots here. They ain't afraid. They stormed the damn Capitol. This is exactly what we need to do at the Pennsylvania Capitol." All right, nonviolent. She seemed to be very much advocating violence. That's what the court found. Actually, the court just found that she broke the letter of the law and went where she shouldn't have and caused a ruckus and chaos. And so she got 14 months. Is that too much? Well, we don't even have to wonder or worry, because much like the Christopher Price case, she didn't actually serve 14 months. There was an appeal filed in another case, and the court took this into account and ordered her release. And by the court ordered her release, I mean specifically, literally, Justice Boasberg. And because that is what a fair interpretation of the law required, that's what she got. Forget all the claims of who is or isn't sympathetic, I say, when you try to decide if this judge was acting like a judge should act. We can see, I think I've just demonstrated at length over a small claim that took me a day and a half to track down. But I just wanted to show to you that sympathy, it's subjective, and it's also open to being twisted and lied about. But the law is the law. And if Boasberg isn't following the law, that can be appealed. And if the administration says that requires impeachment, Chief Justice Roberts can say, no, that's not the way we do it. The next time you want to buy into counter arguments of Chief Justice Roberts getting out over his skis or this judge being deserving of impeachment because of how he interpreted the law, the next time you want to wholeheartedly buy into those arguments and say this judge bad and unsympathetic and issued these rulings that were way too far and put these innocent people in jail, just know that you're not actually being given all the accurate information that you need to make your decision in good faith. But that is exactly what Judge Boasberg is attempting to do in all these cases.